Hi everyone, I am so excited for our video today because I have with me two brushes from Koyomo. Yay, look at that. Look how beautiful they are. Don't they look stunning? Simply exquisite. Now, I have been eyeing these brushes from Koyomo for a long time, and it's only now that I decided to take a deep dive and purchase them. I'm so glad that I have this with me today because it's a very perfect way of closing out my quote unquote brush festival season. So yes, in the Fude community, Koyomo brushes are held at a very high regard because they're quite special. And the main reason why is because the brush heads here are actually made of goat hair, which has been collected in the 70s. So it's kind of like a vintage kind of a goat hair, and that's also the main reason why the brand name is actually called Koyomo, because Ko means old and then Yomo means goat. So it's in literal translation it means old goat. So for me, I would prefer to call this vintage goat hair because it just sounds chicer that way, if you know what I mean. And I have two different types of brushes here. Although the design is the same, the brush heads have actually different goat-haired fibers on them. So we'll be discussing them a little bit later in the video, okay? So I actually purchased my Koyomo brushes off of FudeBeauty.com, which is my brush retailer of choice. And I actually did not purchase these two brushes together because I couldn't afford to purchase them in one go. I actually had to pace my purchases, and that's also the main reason why I'm doing this video at the very end of September, because it takes a while for me to get them, because Koyomo brushes, there's a wait list sometimes. It takes around 1 to 2 weeks for a brush to be made. So not unless if the retailer of your choice actually has one in their possession, then you get it in a week. But if not, you'd have to wait for a week or two before it gets shipped out to you. Now, what I have here are two brushes from the Hana series of Koyomo. Now, Koyomo actually has 3 brush series in their brand, and let me just discuss that a little bit right now. Alright, so I'm now at the Koyomo website, and we can actually see here the names of the 3 brush series that they have in their brand. You have Yuki, Tsuki, and Hana. So these 2 brushes that I have here belong to the Hana series. I do not have any brushes from the Yuki and the Tsuki series because those are more expensive, and I couldn't afford to buy brushes from those series at this time because I don't have the money for it. So I'm just going to scroll down through the website, and this is the brush from the Yuki series. So I'm sure you guys can see the price of the brush, of each brush by the way, here on the side. So not at this time. Maybe in the distant future I can get some from the Yuki series. But Yuki, by the way, means snow, if I remember my Japanese correctly. And what makes these brushes special is that they actually use Chikuhodo goat hairs for this. And after all, again, knowing Koyomo, these are vintage Chikuhodo goat hairs. And the other thing also that you're paying for with the Yuki and the Tsuki series, by the way, is actually the way that the lacquering technique is made with the brush handles, because according to the description, they use the Tamamushi kind of a lacquering technique from the Aizu region in Fukushima. So it's also very different from, let's say, the lacquering technique that Chikuhodo uses, and also the lacquering technique that Hakuhodo uses. You know what I mean. And the Yuki has 3 brushes in the line. So you have an eyeshadow brush, you have a cheek brush, and you have the face brush. So amongst throughout the entire Koyomo brand, the face brush is going to be the most expensive brush to purchase. Now, you don't need to purchase them by a set. You can actually purchase them individually. Alright, so the next brush series that we have here belongs to the Tsuki series, and Tsuki means moon, by the way. So, I mean, it's also very apt to use this name for the series, because look at the color of the handles here. It's very, very moody. So it's like when the moon is blood red and it's so full, that's the mood, and that's the color that it reminds me of. So the Tsuki brushes are a little bit cheaper than the Yuki brushes, and they also have 3 brushes on the Tsuki series. So you have an eyeshadow brush, a cheek brush, and a face brush. So now I am basing on my research, I have realized that the sizes of the brush heads may it be like a cheek brush or a face brush, they're the same all throughout the different series in the brand. So there's no distinction if, like, you know, the Yuki has a much more bigger brush head than the Tsuki, and if the, like, you know, Tsuki is a much more bigger brush head than the Hana. No, they all have the same brush head length, size, and I'm sure to a certain degree the way that they bloom. And the density, I'm not too sure, because again, if you have a very dense brush, you'll have to pay more for that, because the denser the brush head, the more goat hair you have in it. So, you know, the price range actually increases. And now let's go to the Hana series. So the Hana series is actually the much more affordable series in the Koyomo brand. And within the Hana series, there are also different brush lines in them, quote unquote. And the most affordable is actually the Nadeshiko series. So this is the one that comes with a pink handle here, which is very cute. And the brush head here actually uses Hakutotsuho goat hair. Nadeshiko, by the way, I think is the name of a flower in Japanese, and it has like a very nice, delicate pink and white coloration. So again, a very apt name. And then the next line that we have here is actually, it's called the Pearl White Hana series. So this also uses Hakutotsuho goat hair, and it's a little bit more expensive now than the Nadeshiko series. Okay, so the next series that I'm going to be talking about is the Beni Gradation series, which is this brush that I have here. So this one is like, in the Hana range, the Beni Gradation is like the mid-range price that you have in it. And what makes this more expensive, I guess, is the way, like, you know, the lacquering technique used here, because after all, like, you know, the handle here is very attractive, and it's also very, very cute. And the brush head of the Beni Gradation series actually uses Hakutotsuho goat hair. And the next line on the Hana series is the Hana Walnut. So it's more expensive because I think the handles here are made of walnut. So that's what gives this brush line its own, like, you know, unique selling point. And the other thing also is that the Hana Walnut line uses Chikuhodo goat hair now. So it's a much more higher grade of goat hair. And then next, this is the Hana Sakura series, and this is more expensive than the walnut, and it uses a different kind of a lacquering technique on the handle. I think, basing on what I understand, is that they have a wiping technique. So I'm not really sure on how it works, but it just creates this very different kind of a texture on the handle. And of course, this brush line on the Hana series also uses Chikuhodo goat hair. And then next, what we have here is the Aizu-nuri Hana brush. Now this one is the most expensive brush on the Hana series, and this is the brush that I have here. And this uses Chikuhodo goat hair, and of course you can see this very beautiful lacquering on the handle, like this one. And the lacquering technique on the Aizu-nuri brush here on the Hana series actually has the same lacquering technique which is used on the Tsuki series of the Koyomo brushes. So yeah, so those are the series of brushes that's being sold by the brand Koyomo. So anyway, so at least in us discussing that, we now realize that Koyomo uses 3 different types of grades of goat hair. So you have Hakutotsuho, Sokoho, and Saikoho. So of course, Saikoho being the most expensive, and then the cheapest will be from the Hakutotsuho goat hair grade. Now I'm just sidestepping here a little bit because when I was initially doing research for the Koyomo brushes, I have realized that different like, you know, resources online describes the Hakutotsuho goat hairs from Koyomo differently. Like, for example, in Sonia G's post, she describes them as white Ototsuho goat hair. And then on Fude Beauty, it's Ototsuho. And then in other online resources. For example, with Jaybird Walking, like, one of our brush goddesses, she uses Hakutotsuho. So it was making me a little bit confused because I don't know which is which. So I don't know if it's really Hakutotsuho or it's just Otototsuho, because Ototsuho is a different, like, grade of goat hair from Hakutotsuho. So anyway, so again, when I was researching this, luckily for me, I have just actually finished basic 1 Japanese lesson, so I'm actually able to read a little bit of some hiragana and katakana. And here at the very bottom of the page of the Koyomo website, because on my phone it doesn't translate automatically to English, but on my laptop it does. But I consider it to be very lucky because I'm actually able to read here that this very last description here for the different types of goat hairs that they use, this part here actually reads Haku o Totsu Ho Yomo. So it's made of Hakutotsuho goat hair. So at least this gives me the confirmation that I have actually been wanting to know, because at least when I am collecting brushes at this time of my life, I'm not collecting every single type of brush that each brand is actually delivering out into the market, but I'm actually trying to collect brush heads with different types of hairs in them, because I just want to be educated about the different types of brush heads being used in brushes. And at least now I know that this is actually made of Hakutotsuho goat hair, so I have something to compare it to the other Hakutotsuho goat hairs that I have in my collection. So with that being said, let's now talk about these 2 brushes intimately. Now, the first brush that we're going to be talking about is the cheek brush from the Beni Gradation Hana series. Now, I'm going to be inserting B-rolls at this part of the video because I was able to shoot this brush under natural light when I first got it, because it looks stunning under natural sunlight. As you guys can see here, the handle has a very nice blue toned red, and this is very obvious because the color fades into this very nice pink yet lavender hue at the base of the handle. And the Koyomo brand is actually stamped on this metallic ferrule here, which is actually very pretty. And by the way, there's a lot of silver glitters that surrounds the entire brush handle. Now, as for the bristles, look how beautiful it looks like. It's very plush, and it looks very soft, and it has a very nice snap back into position. And if I just twirl the brush around, we can see how nice the light jumps back from the bristles of the brush head. I love the round brush head design here. It's one of my go-to brush head designs, and it's just a very pretty brush, I have to say. Now, in terms of softness, you can see here that it's quite moderately soft, and it's placed quite nicely here at the palm of my hand. So this is the cheek brush from the Beni Gradation series. Alright, now let's take a much more intimate look at the cheek brush from the Aizu-nuri line from the Hana series of Koyomo. I love the moody color of the handle of this brush. It has a very nice pop of red color where the light hits it, and then the surrounding areas it's black. It's like holographic to a certain degree. It's very, very moody and very chic looking, I have to say. The Koyomo branding is stamped on the ferrule here, but I think it's not lacquered over, so I think in time that's going to become erased. Now, this is the bristle that we see here, and look how well the light bounces off of the tips of the bristles. And if I just run my fingers through the brush head, you can see it's quite airy, and it has a nice snap back into position. Now, I love the round brush head design. Again, I love these brush heads of this nature. And in terms of softness, if I'm just going to run the brush through my hand, we can see that it's quite soft, softer than the previous brush that I showed you. And if I just press it into my palm, you can see how well this plays on the palm of my hand. So it's actually a very soft brush. So look at this beauty. Isn't this a very gorgeous brush? Koyomo, by the way, actually uses sakura wood for their brush handles, and that's what we see in these 2 brushes that I have here. There's actually one exception, and it's for the walnut Hana series brushes because those brushes use walnut for their handles. Now, as you guys can see here, the brush heads are quite similar, but they're different. Even if they share the same brush head length, they actually bloom differently, wherein the Beni Gradation actually blooms wider than the brush from the Aizu-nuri. If you just put these two brushes on my palms, we can actually see that they are quite short. So if you are someone who likes short brushes, this will be good for you. And if you're someone who likes longer, like, handles on brushes, this might be an issue for you. But I do have to say though that these brushes both actually lay very nicely on the hands, like, in terms of ergonomics. It just anchors itself very nicely here on the base between my thumb and my forefinger. They're actually well balanced. It's not top heavy at all, so at least we don't have to worry about these brushes, like, toppling over if you like to air dry them at the very edge of your table, because of the design of the handle of the brush here, wherein you have a substantial amount of weight here at the base, which counteracts with the actual weight of the brush head. The only issue that I have with these brushes is that because of the very rounded base here, it takes up so much space in my brush kit. Other than that, that's no big deal for me. Like, I can also store them in some other way if I want to. Both of these brushes actually came in their own display box like this. Very beautiful. If you open the box, you can see that it's actually lined with this very nice, like, silk-like kind of a fabric, and in white, which you can actually lay the brush in if you want to. So if you're a boy and you're watching this, and if you're wondering if what kind of a gift you can give your girlfriend, this is a great idea for that, especially if she loves makeup. And of course, because this is a very special brush, it can be a very special gift for a very special kind of an occasion. Also, the other interesting thing with the box is that it's actually stated here that this is actually made of recycled paper. That's very interesting. I didn't know that it came from the paper cranes from the Memorial Tower in the Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park, which is very interesting. And it also says here that a portion of proceeds will be donated to the Atomic Bomb Dome Preservation Project Fund. Now, as I said earlier, the cheek brush from the Beni Gradation series is made of Hakutotsuho goat hair. And looking at it now, I am quite surprised to observe that it looks smoother than the other Hakutotsuho brush that I have in my collection, which is the worker friend brush from Sonia G. So if we just put them side by side here, maybe, I don't know if the camera will pick this up, but the Hakutotsuho goat hair here from the worker fan, you can see some texture on the strand of the goat hair. I can also see some texture here on the Hakutotsuho goat hair of the cheek brush from the Beni Gradation, but it's not as textured as the worker fan brush of Sonia G, which is again very, very interesting to me. Now, in terms of softness, I could say that the worker fan brush of Sonia G is also still very, very smooth, but I can again feel that resistance, like, that strength in the belly of this brush head, which I can also feel with the cheek brush from the Beni Gradation line from the Hana series of Koyomo. And in terms of softness, I can really say that the brush head of the cheek brush from the Beni Gradation series is actually softer than the brush head of the worker friend brush. Now, if you're a fan of Sonia G and if you have this with you, I'm sure you would have remarked already on how soft the brush head is, but in terms of comparison, this is way softer than this, and then it blows my mind again that, like, these are the same types of goat hair grades, but they are decades apart. And the difference between these two is actually very subtle. Like, I think only if you have, like, had so much time, like, observing brushes and, playing around with brushes, you will actually be able to feel it. But then again, also, the brush head designs of these two brushes are also very different, but the overall feel is subtly different, I have to say, which is actually very interesting to me. Look at that. Now, in terms of brush head design, again, I love a rounded brush head, so that's the main attraction that I have with these Koyomo brushes, because they actually do remind me of how my Yachiyo brushes look like. So the Yachiyo brush here from Chikuhodo, if we put it beside the cheek brush from the Beni series, it looks very similar in the way that they bloom. Now if you look here on top, again, they also share that very same, rounded brush head shape. Now, I'm not too sure what grade of hair is used on the Yachiyo brushes. I actually emailed Chikuhodo and asked them, out of curiosity, what it's made of, but I never got a reply, and it's been like a little over a week now. But just seeing the texture here of the brush on the Yachiyo, it looks like it could be a Hakutotsuho goat hair fiber. And if I put the Yachiyo brush beside the Beni Gradation line, I can see that they both share the same texture. And in terms of softness, I'm just rubbing them both together. The brush head of the Beni Gradation is remarkably softer than the Yachiyo brush. So at least now we know, and after all, I am someone who loves using the Yachiyo brushes. I digress. If you're someone who's been interested in knowing about Yachiyo brushes, I have a video on this. I'm going to put the link down in the description box to that, so you can go and check that out. And I'm glad that I'm able to have these two side by side because I think they're quite comparable. And the Chikuhodo Yachiyo brush feels tougher than the cheek brush from the Beni Gradation brush. Alright, next let's talk about the cheek brush from the Aizu-nuri line from the Hana series of Koyomo. And this is made of Chikuhodo goat hair. When I'm just really touching this with my fingers, it feels very, very soft. It actually feels softer than the Beni Gradation brush. And I don't have a lot of brushes in my collection that is made of Chikuhodo goat hair, especially in a brush head of this size. The only Chikuhodo goat hair that I have is my rose brush from Koyomo, the one that I made when I went and have like a brush making experience in Koyomo in 2019 when I went there before the brush festival. And if we put them side by side, and I'm not too sure if this is going to be a very good comparison because after all, the Koyomo brush here is already dyed, so it's going to be much more stronger, and it's going to feel much more tougher, if you know what I mean, in comparison to the other brush, because after all, dyes actually add more strength into the bristle of a brush. So this rose brush here is also very, very soft, but because of the texture of the brush head, it looks like a rose, it doesn't feel as soft, if you know what I mean. So it's going to be a futile experience for us to compare these two brushes together. Anyway, the other Chikuhodo brush here that I have is this Tenseido brush. This is a WC14T brush. And again, this is also dyed, so I'm not sure if it's going to be a very nice, comparison. But I can say, though, that the Tenseido brush is actually very, very soft. Is it almost the same softness as the Aizu-nuri brush from the Hana series? I'm not too sure, but it's quite soft. But then again, because after all, it's not as dense as the cheek brush from the Aizu-nuri line. Now, the only other brush that I have here that I know is made of Chikuhodo hair is the base one brush of Sonia G, but this one has a mix of nylon fibers on it, so again, it's not going to be a nice comparison, if you know what I mean. So instead, let me put the WC14T brush again beside it, and we can also see that the WC14T brush has a little bit of texture on its bristles, so you guys can see here, which I can also see here on the bristles of the cheek brush from the Aizu-nuri line. But the texture on the bristles here is not as pronounced as the texture that we see here from the Beni Gradation series of the Hakutotsuho brush. Because you can really see it, here, if we put it this way. So you can really see the texture. On this brush, on the Chikuhodo brush, is actually smoother. And this smoothness actually reflects in this rose brush from Koyomo. And I'm also going to pick up my WC14T from Tenseido so that you can also see that smoother texture in comparison to the Hakutotsuho brush from the Beni Gradation. So again, that's a very interesting comparison to do. But then again, I do have to say that now that I'm playing around with these brushes, I'm just feeling it on my hand and rubbing both brushes on my face, they feel very, very soft. They also feel quite strong, So I believe that they might have a very nice, like, buffing ability. And now that I'm like, just like, dancing the brush heads on my skin, I don't feel any prickling sensation at all. And also, like, doing this tapping motion, I can say that this has more strength in its core, in its belly, while this one is actually very, very soft. So you can see that it actually splays out more in comparison to this one, especially if you press it from the top and you can try to push it into the base. To me, this one will have a much more stronger buffing power than this brush. So again, I'm so glad that we're doing this activity together, because this is one great way of actually getting to know these brushes with us today. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to apply a little bit of foundation and some powder, because let's try to see how well these brushes are going to apply color on the cheeks. Okay, so I have some foundation down, concealer, and some powder, and now let's all try to use these two brushes with blushes. So the first thing that I want to try though is I have here a very intense color. This one, this is Exhibit A from NARS, and I'm gonna first use the Beni Gradation brush for this, and I'm just going to lightly press it here on the brush head. And this is how much pigment this brush head actually picks up, and I'm just going to be tapping it here on the highest point of my cheeks, and this is how much color it actually delivers. Oh, it's very, very soft, but it's quite intense. I think I picked up a little bit too much of the blush, but then again, because of my skin tone, this is going to come out more. But let me just see if this will enable us to blend it out. Look at that. Look at, very nice. It's also very diffused. So at least we are actually able to blend out color using this brush. Look at that. Very, very nice. Nice application of color, don't you think? And it's actually not disturbing the products that I've applied before the blush. So at least even if this is quite a strong quote unquote brush head, it's actually soft enough that it doesn't actually sorry, there's just some shedding going on. Where was I? So yeah, so even if it feels quite strong, it's actually still soft enough to actually not disturb products that you put on your face. Very interesting. Okay, so now let's try the Aizu-nuri brush, and let's pick up the same color here. And let us apply that here on this part of the cheek. Okay, so at least now we know that if you want a more intense pop of color, use the Beni Gradation brush. But if you want to have a much more diffuse kind of color, build the bowl application on the cheeks, you can use the Aizu-nuri brush. How fantastic is that? Very interesting. Look how different the finishes are that these two brushes delivers. Look at that, how cool. So at least you can always adjust your makeup application in a way that will suit you basing on the brushes that you have. So basing on what we did today, so if if I have those baked gelée formulas, or those blushes that can act like as a highlight also at the same time, I'm going to be using the Beni Gradation for that. And then for this one, if I have very highly pigmented blushes that I want to build color slowly on the cheeks, then I'm going to use this brush. Okay, very interesting. So let us try playing around some more. And I have here the Universe Unlocked palette from Hourglass, and I'm going to be picking up this color here. It's a finishing powder, and I haven't actually picked up any of the new Hourglass palettes yet because the exchange rate between the peso and the dollar is so high. So I don't think I could afford it at this time. And also there are some colors on the Hourglass palettes that I already have with me. So I think I'm gonna research some more before I purchase them. Alright, so this is how the Beni Gradation applies this finishing powder all over my cheeks. It's actually very well blended, not bad at all, very, very nice. It also delivers a very nice gradation of color, as the name implies. I love that. Just have some shedding going on, which is very natural for a new brush. Okay, now I'm just going to pick up some of this finishing powder from Laura Mercier, the Candle Glow in number 2. And I'm using the Aizu-nuri brush. And I'm just going to see if this will apply a good amount of product into the face, but I think the brush head is just way too soft, even if this is made of Chikuhodo goat hair. So I think I'm going to revert to the Beni, and I'm just going to pick up a very nice generous amount of color, and it's actually able to apply and pick up this type of a formula, so that's actually great. Let me just spread it all over my face. Okay, so now because this is actually a very soft brush, I'm going to try to apply a bronzer. So this is the City Bronzer from Maybelline, and I'm just applying it in a sculpting motion here along my cheeks. It's also able to add some intensity into the cheeks, right along the cheekbones. It's actually also able to apply a nice diffuse amount of color, and it's also actually able to deliver a very nice, layer of color into the skin. Not so bad at all. Very nice and very pretty. So at least in doing this, we now know that we can actually use this brush for, different types of products for the face. You can also use this for powder, I'm so sure. If you don't want to use this for colored products, because again, you don't want to wash it as often because it's not delicate, but because of the nature of the bristles of these two brushes, because after all, they were collected in the 70s, so it's like basically vintage. So it's really, really special. It's actually, hang on, before I continue, just blend it out some more. It's actually able to blend out the color nicely. Okay, so I think we're nearing the end of my vlog, and my final thoughts on these two brushes is that I'm so glad that I finally decided to get them right now because one, they are a very nice variety to add into my collection because, again, I'm going to repeat it. I am not collecting makeup brushes for the sake of collecting makeup brushes, but I am collecting makeup brushes basing on the fact that I want to have different types of brush heads that I can learn from. So that's very, very important. And secondly is that Fude Beauty has reverted their prices into yen, which is actually great for me at this time because if this was placed at their dollar rate, it's going to be very expensive for me to purchase right now because the dollar is very, very strong. And if you're trying to figure out in your head if it's going to be worth it to purchase at this time, if you want to take advantage of how strong the dollar is, and if you are interested in purchasing a much more luxurious, quote-unquote, kind of a makeup brush, then you have the Koyomo brushes for that. And also one other thing, take a look into your makeup routine, again, your makeup sentiments, if these Koyomo brushes will fit into them. For example, like for me, after doing this activity, I am going to be using these brushes solely for powder products because even if they're undyed goat hair and you can use them for creams, I'm not going to do that because again, these are vintage goat hair, so I want them to last longer. And speaking of price tags, I know it's quite expensive. Like for example, this one is at 25,000 yen, and this one is at 10,000 yen. So it's above the regular prices for most brushes, especially with how small the brush head size is. For me, my sentiments with, like, expensive brushes is that you actually take care of it more, and it's going to actually last longer than, let's say, a much more cheaper alternative. Because the problem is, if you have a cheaper alternative, you just toss it about. You don't store it well, you don't wash it well, you don't keep an eye on it. But if you have something that's very precious, you actually do take care of it, you look out for it. And that's one thing that I like about having luxury types of brushes, because they actually will last longer in my care. As time rolls by, you realize also that you get more value for your money because of that. So again, just assess, the way that you do your makeup, and assess if you are actually willing to spend your hard-earned cash for something like this. Then by all means, do get one. You don't have to get two Koyomo brushes. You don't have to get three. You don't have to get all of them. But you can you can assess what type of brush that you need in your collection, and also what type of brush that you're willing to spend for. Alright, so that's it for me today. I'm gonna let you guys go now because my partner is making coffee and he's banging things around, which I'm sure you guys can hear. So if you have any more questions about all of the products that I use today, how I purchase my Koyomo brushes, and anything that you want to ask me about this, please let me know down in the comments box, and let's have a conversation about it. Alright, so I'm going to let you go now. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you're having a good day wherever you are. Bye!